Hi everyone, it's Kelly from Kelly's Bead Boutique. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I came up with this fun bracelet that I call the Layer Me Up bracelet. It's super on trend even all these years later. I think you guys are going to enjoy it, so come and join me and I'll show you how to create your very own. Okay, so to make the Layer Me Up bracelet, I'm going to be using a tray. If you don't have a tray, you can use a lid off a box, or if you have a macrame board, just get creative and see what you can use, but you do need something to hold your piece down. I'm also going to be using a little bit of GS Hypo cement at the end. I have a little piece of rat tail here. You can use anything you want. All I do is create a little loop, and I'll show you how I use that later. I have a button. And I have some, I think this is 3mm rhinestone chain, and I have 7 little pieces here. It's all in one, but I have like 7 crystals in a row there. I have some Chinese knotting cord, and this is about 2 meters. And this is a small one. This is maybe 0.4 or 0.5. It's not a very heavy one. And I also have about 24 inches of 1.5mm leather. And that's about it. So let's get started and I'll show you how to create this fun bracelet. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is run my leather through the shank of my button, and I want to find the center point. So I just match up the ends and bring it down like that. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to create just a little knot on the end just to make it easier to tie this up. So just kind of do that. Okay, now I have my center point there. Now I'm going to take this loop that I created. It doesn't have to be anything, but all I want to be able to do is just kind of hook it in like that. You could use a bullnose clip on this, but I do find that this is a little bit easier. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is put it on the front like that, and I want to have the button just at the top, and it's going to be kind of hard to see this on camera, so I'm going to just do it off camera and flip this over. Okay, so now I'm going to take one end of my rat tail. I'm just going to move this up so you can see, hopefully. And I just put it through the end there in the loop. This may not look so beautiful on camera, but I'm going to just try to demonstrate how I tighten this up. Okay, so now I just kind of pull that tight, and then I'm just going to create a little knot there. So I don't have to have this super tight, but I do want to have my leather quite taut. Okay, so do that, and if you've got somebody to help you, that always helps, but I'm pretty good at tying knots by myself there. So that's all I'm doing, is just creating a little knot there, turn that back over, and this is what I have. So now you can just kind of pull it up. You just want that to be, it's not super taut, but it just has a little bit of tension on it. Okay, so that's the first thing to get started. Okay, so what I've done is taken my 2 meters of Chinese knotting cord, and I have found the midsection. So what I do is I place it behind, and then I get my sides all kind of pulled out there. So now I'm going to just be starting with macrame. So this is just going to be P's and Q's. The first one's always the hardest for me to show you because I have to hold on to it. So on the right hand side, I'm going to be creating the first loop of my P, and then I'm going to be taking the tail, and I want to make sure that I'm on this side of the leather, and I need to get that underneath and up through that loop. So again, the first one's always the hardest because I have to have my hands on there. So I just take that, grab it from underneath, and pull it up inside that loop. And now I'm going to tighten that up. And I don't have to have these exactly perfect because I've got lots and lots of Chinese knotting cord. So I want to go about 1/4 of an inch away from the shank of the button and make that nice and tight. So now it's going to be a little bit easier to show you how to do this. So now I'm going to create my Q. So it's just like a backwards P, around like that. Now I want to make sure that this one is over top of that tail, but on this side of the leather. Now I just reach through and grab that and tighten that up. And that's a first completed square knot. So you can see I've got like a bump on either side. So now I make my P, go over top, pull that through, and I'm making sure that these are nice and tight. And I just tend to do it fairly quickly in my hands. I don't actually make a P. What I do is I kind of pop that over top like that, make sure that's over top of that tail. You always want to make sure it's over top, and then I reach through. So I'm kind of, well, I don't know, I'm not lazy, but I'm just like efficient. I like to get things done. So I don't tend to, line things up perfectly. I do find that this is easier if you tilt your tray towards you. I've had rotator cuff surgery and I have a torn right rotator cuff. So this motion up here is brutal for me. So tipping this towards me is a lot less painful, but I can't really show you on camera that way. So I'll suffer for this. Okay, so that's basically all I'm going to be doing, and I'm going to do that for about 2.5 inches down the leather. So let me complete that, and then I'll come back and show you how to add the rest of this in here. Okay, for the sake of time, I had a second one all made up, and this one is in a really pretty sort of silvery gray. I have quite a few different colors available, and I'll have those listed in a kit below in the description box. Okay, so I've done about 2.5 inches. Let's just measure that. About 2.5 inches or so. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start making one of my square knots. And just before I tighten it up, I'm going to take that first link of the crystal chain and I'm going to pop it underneath the neck of that. So I just kind of lined it up on top here just to kind of balance it, and now I'm going to tighten that up. So don't worry if it flops around, because it'll tighten up once you do the second side. And sometimes I find it's easier if you open up your leather and pop it in the middle like that. There we go. So we've got our first side done. So now I need to make the other side of my square knot, and I'm going to go right up inside that little link there. So I'm going to get it started, and then I'm going to bring that up inside the same link that I was working on. And we just don't want to have that. There we go. Pull that underneath. So now before I tighten that up, I'm going to have that seated properly and then give that a nice tight pull. Okay, so now I'm going to create my second one. So we want to have that in between the second and the third one. So create my square knot. And then I'm going to make the other side. It's a little futzy to get that to stay in there at first, but once you get the first couple, then it gets in there nice and snug. So I can see right here that I didn't pull tight enough on that first one, so I'm going to go back just like a shoelace and kind of tighten that up. Pop that in there, and now I'm going to make it nice and tight. So it's really important that your macrame knots are all nice and snug. And just make sure that this is sitting where you want it to. All right, and I'm just going to carry on. So pop that in between. Do my P on one side. Make sure it's nice and snug. And then do my Q in between. On the same, going to go in the same side there, like in between those same ones. And make sure that that's nice and snug there. What I like to do is go by the bumps on here. So I'm going to move this down a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. So when I do this, I did my P. You can see there's a on that side. And I'll try to zoom in to make sure that you can see the bumps. So I've got that bump there, so that tells me I now need to do my Q on that side. And then I'll show you what happens on this side. So I tighten that up, and now you can see that there's a bump there, so that tells me I have to start on that side. So it's always good to know how to pick up a pattern if you should need to walk away. So I'm just going to carry on for another 2.5 inches, and then I'll show you how to finish off this bracelet. Okay, so I've done about 2 inches of macrame there, and now what I need to do to finish this off is I'm going to run a little bead of GS Hypo along the top of this leather cording for about 1/2 inch or so. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my knots over top of that. I want to try to keep it all out of the way so that I don't get glue everywhere. But that just sort of helps this stay in there nice and tightly. So what I do is I make my knot and then I pull it up on top of there. And if you do get a little bit of glue on your Chinese knotting cord, you won't really see it because it does dry clear. But I do try to keep it out of the way as much as I can so that it doesn't get glue all over me as I'm trying to create this. But the Chinese knotting cord is great, but it doesn't stick super tight like the Irish wax linen that I love to use does. So having this little bit of glue on the end will help with that. You have to work fairly fast because you don't want that glue to dry on you. All right, I'm just going to take a measurement. So we're at 2.5. So now I've got 2.5, 2.5, and just over an inch here. So that's created 6.25. And by the time I've ended, this will end up just around a 7-inch bracelet. So of course you can adjust accordingly. You might want to add just a little bit more on either side if you have a larger wrist, or take a little bit off if you have a smaller wrist. So I'm just going to take this off, and then I'm going to show you how I finish this up. Okay, so I've got that all removed from the board. So now I'm going to make a little knot in the front of this. We're not going to worry too much about how it looks because I am going to be covering this a bit, but I do want to keep it, you know, sort of neat. I always try to make things as neat as possible. So I'm just going to create a little knot at the very end, and I want to pull that really snug. And then I'm going to flip this over to the back, and I'm going to create a surgeon's knot on that side. So to do that, I'm just going to wrap it through once, and then one more time. And I'll pull that really, really tight on this side. And then I'm going to give it a little trim. So now I do have my thread zapper with me. If you don't have one, you can use a lighter to try to sear these ends, or you could do an extra surgeon's knot and trim that off. But I do like to sear the ends. So what I'm going to do is just hold this down until it gets nice and red hot like that. And then I come in and I just kind of melt that down, and it will sort of smoke up a little bit, but not to worry. And that just helps it. I just kind of push them together, and that helps it from popping out. Now the one thing that will happen when you do use one of these thread zappers is it does make this a little bit hard on the end. So I like to take my pliers and kind of squish that end down just a little bit to sort of soften it up. All right, so now what we're going to do is create just an overhand knot. Yes, I'm not using a barrel knot. Just going to keep it simple on this one. And what I want to do is create that knot right on top of, or at the very end of that little bit that I did there, and that will help so that you don't have any of those hardened edges against your skin. Okay, so now we've just got our little overhand knot, and now I want to take my button and place it in between to sort of give me a measurement, and I know that my button needs to accommodate about that size, so now I'm going to make another one. So I want to tighten that up, but just before I pull it completely tight, I always like to go in with my button and just pop it in there to make sure that it's the right size. And then I'm going to give that a nice tight pull, and then I'm going to use my cutters and I'm going to trim off the end. And now when you're doing up your bracelets, find that this end takes the most punishment. So I do like to take a little bit of GS Hypo and run it into the knot to make sure that it's not going anywhere. And you can even pop a little bit on this side too. Okay, so there you go. There's our Layer Me Up bracelet. I think you guys are going to love this one. Give it a try. You don't have to use all 7 links of this rhinestone chain. You could use 1 or 3 or 5. You can kind of do whatever you like. We'll have quite a few different colors available. You'll get to choose the color of your metal, the color of your Chinese knotting cord, and the color of your leather. And these ones are super affordable. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give me a thumbs up. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel and leave me a comment. I love to hear from everybody. And thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.